We want to bring you our first Bitcoin Center pleb of the week, Gladiator, who runs the irresponsibly long MicroStrategy community on X.
Gladiator, when did or how did you first become aware of MicroStrategy and Bitcoin?
I started trading full time, or at least trying to, in 2023, and I joined an X community or Twitter community at the time, and they really normalized Bitcoin for me. Although they never explained it, it was more of a trading group based off charts, and they kind of just treated it like anything else, whether stocks. So that made me have more of an open mind to it, because I was surprised at first that the group was looking at Bitcoin like any other stock, because I thought it was, I always had this weird notion about Bitcoin that it was a little weird, and then that normalized it for me. So I started looking at Bitcoin more like any other trade, and then I traded it a tiny bit, I think, to different Bitcoin stocks throughout the last 2 years. And then what ended up happening, I didn't really understand it at all through any of this, but what ended up happening was the very last days of September, someone I followed on X, a good trader, said, "Look at this Bitcoin chart." It was a cup and handle going back about 4 years. He said, "This is clearly the sector of quarter 4." So I looked at it. I said, "Wow, this is the same chart I've seen throughout all the other." I've read books about the cup and handle. It's the chart you look for. So I said, "Wow, something big's happening here in Bitcoin." So I immediately started buying Bitcoin stocks. I bought a little bit of iBit. I bought MicroStrategy, Coinbase, I think, because I knew nothing about which stocks to buy. I just started buying, and I learned from my past in trading that relative strength was important for stocks. So, such as Nvidia was always the best semiconductor, and just because it was outperforming the other semiconductors doesn't mean you want to diversify into other semis. So that's why I started going long specifically in MicroStrategy and ended up going all in MicroStrategy, because I saw the relative strength there. And then as I was doing this, I really started diving into it before I started understanding it. But concurrently, at the same time, I started watching Michael Saylor podcasts, which really helped clear up the Bitcoin notion for me. And then I felt a little more comfortable with it, because I thought not only is the chart there, and the data was there too. I looked at the data on halving years in the following year, and the quarter 4 of halving years was always really bullish, and then the following year was really bullish. So I viewed it just from that as more than a little trade. It was going to be at least a year trade. I started realizing that there's real value in Bitcoin as a store of value. It's perfect money. It's gold, but it's digital gold, but it's better because it has a better stock to flow ratio. It can be transacted easier. It can be divided as many times as you want. You can send it across space to other countries. So just off of that, I was always a big believer in the U.S. dollar is constantly being printed. So as soon as I figured out it was the best store of value against that, and it was backed by the hardest technology ever created with the hash rate always increasing, I started to think, wow, this is really the place to be over the next at least year, maybe longer, because not only is it the best store of value, but it's the future, and it's crazy technology, and the future is technology. So that was kind of my journey with Bitcoin. And then with MicroStrategy, I just viewed it as more Bitcoin, the highest performing Bitcoin stock. And then I started diving down the rabbit hole of MicroStrategy a little bit. And I started realizing what they were doing with Bitcoin yield and how I think a lot of people overcomplicate MicroStrategy. I think it's very simple. You're just betting on Michael Saylor and MicroStrategy borrowing money more efficiently than you can to buy Bitcoin. So with MicroStrategy, I think your Bitcoin per share is always increasing. And then Bitcoin over the long run is going to increase a lot. So then you get double parabolic. So that's my thoughts on MicroStrategy. I keep it very simple. I think the way they do that is through the ATMs. Because their stock trades at a premium, they can run those ATMs and dilute less than they add with Bitcoin. So if their stock trades at a 3 times premium, they're able to turn $1 into $3 roughly. And then because it's more volatile than Bitcoin, the bondholders love it. So the bondholders essentially invest in convertible notes with MicroStrategy, I think, and via that they can get more money to buy Bitcoin and increase Bitcoin per share. And then also you have to factor in that a lot of fund managers can't buy Bitcoin or the ETFs itself, so they have to buy they have to buy a stock, and MicroStrategy is the best vehicle for them to buy. So due to that, there's always going to be a premium as well, in my opinion. So all those things come together where MicroStrategy can essentially arbitrage their situation to buy more Bitcoin and increase Bitcoin per share. So, and as I went through the math on the demand, the cool thing about Bitcoin is the demand, we're seeing exponential increase in demand with the institutions. We got MicroStrategy, the miners are starting to buy. A lot of companies are starting to copy the MicroStrategy playbook, SMLR. There's many of them, there's tens. So we're seeing a huge spike in demand, not only in the institutions, but the ETF inflows. The boomers can now buy it in their retirements with the SEC approve of the BlackRock ETF IBIT. And then you get the nation states coming, Trump won, so there's a chance the US government starts buying Bitcoin to back their currency. And the other countries are likely front running it. And that all makes sense because a currency is nothing unless it's backed by something hard. So in the old days, people used to buy gold, and the countries that stayed on the silver standard got destroyed by gold. Countries on the gold standard, I think that's very similar to what's going to play out in the future with Bitcoin versus gold. I think Bitcoin today is like gold back then, and gold today is like silver back then. And just from, if you just think about the stock to flow ratio, it makes perfect sense for Bitcoin to destroy gold. So all the countries are going to want to convert to Bitcoin, or buy it to back their currency. It's just a matter of time. And long story short, all these things lead to a exponential increase in Bitcoin demand, which where you get the super cycle. And unlike other commodities, you can't increase the supply of Bitcoin once that demand spikes because the supply is fixed with the miner, the amount released by the miners each day and each year. And there's only 21 million forever, and there's already over 19 million in circulation. So what we're going to see, in my opinion, is we're seeing exponential demand spike, and the supply is already what it is. So then it's just going to go parabolic. And so if say everyone in the world decided tomorrow they wanted to buy silver, what would happen would just be a lot of people in the world would just work harder to make more silver. The miners, there'd be more minings created to create more silver. They'd work harder. So you'd see a temporary spike in the silver price, and then it would come back down to reality. Whereas for Bitcoin, you see that we're seeing a massive demand spike, and everyone's realizing it's the best thing to buy, but the supply is fixed. So I don't really see a way for over the next year to 10 years, Bitcoin doesn't hit 1 million, maybe 10 million in 10 years. And then you factor in MicroStrategy's always increasing Bitcoin per share, and they're going to trade at a premium, and eventually they're going to be a Bitcoin bank, I think. So all those things lead to MicroStrategy, I think, taking over the world over the next year to 10 years. And then, but by the way, I still like Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin's the reason why MicroStrategy is going to be successful, but MicroStrategy, I think, in my eyes, is just more Bitcoin. So anyways,
Gladiator, let me interrupt you real quick, and I want to find out from you. I mean, everything you're painting, that picture that you're painting, you're being very calm and just nailing the facts, but this is like super bullish, and you're painting a picture where if a Bitcoin 10x's, what happens to a stock like MicroStrategy? What do you see over the course of next year? How bullish do you think it could get?
So here's the thing. I always joke on my X, like I ran my model. My model says MicroStrategy is going to do that. I'm essentially poking fun when I say that at all the hedge funds who put out their models saying MicroStrategy is overvalued. So I don't have a definitive answer on how high it will go. What I can say is I could see if Bitcoin were to 10x, I could see MicroStrategy going anywhere up from 20x to 75x, I think, because I just noticed a trend where every time Bitcoin doubles, it seems like MicroStrategy 4x's. So if Bitcoin doubles 3 times over the next year to get to 1 million, that would be 4x's for MicroStrategy, which would be a 64x. And when you add in, so that sounds crazy, but I'm just betting on a trend to remain in place that's already been there. And then also you have to factor in the new FASB accounting rules, right? So I think starting this quarter, MicroStrategy is able to fairly account its increase in Bitcoin price. So until now, they couldn't do that. But so let's say Bitcoin hit 1 million, and let's say, so they have roughly, I think, somewhere around $50 billion of Bitcoin, give or take. Let's ignore how much they're going to buy this year. Let's just do that. If Bitcoin were to 10x to 1 million, that would be roughly $500 billion they could put in their earnings, and they'd probably double their Bitcoin buys this year. So that let's just guess they doubled their Bitcoin buys, and it was closer to 1 trillion in earnings if Bitcoin hit a million. then you give them a multiple for being a growth company. That's where I think it could hit $10 trillion market cap in a year if Bitcoin hit 1 million. But at the same time, you have to factor in they're always increasing shares. So it's not like the shares would go up to that extent. It's the market cap could go up. But I just really think if Bitcoin becomes what we think it's going to become and hits eventually $1 million, $10 million, I don't think there's a scenario which MicroStrategy doesn't become the biggest company in the world just because they have first mover advantage and they're always going to increase that lead. And by the way, every time they run those ATMs, there's a big misconception that they're diluting the shareholders. No, it's accretive. The Bitcoin per share is always increasing. People mistake short-term price movements for what it's doing to the fundamental value of the share. So over the last 2 months, we've seen all the Bitcoin stocks and really the whole market go down. People confuse that with something wrong going on with MicroStrategy. That's just market weakness. So if you look at the stock fundamentally, the Bitcoin per share last year went up 74%, I think. So that, to me, that's massive. I really pay attention to the Bitcoin yield number.
All right. Well, this has gotten me incredibly bullish. I'm going to go downstairs to the Bitcoin Federal ATM and get some more Bitcoin. But before I do that, how did you end up invited to Michael Saylor's 100,000 Bitcoin New Year's Eve party? And how much fun did you have and who did you bring?
Yeah, so I don't really know how I got invited, to be honest. Well, I know how I got invited. Eric Wise, I think that's how you pronounce his name. He invited me. He just DM'd me. He said, "Hey, would you want to go to this party?" And I was kind of I couldn't really believe it. The 100K party, of course. So immediately I said yes, and I got an invite. And I don't know if Michael Saylor even knew who I was or how I got invited because Eric didn't even follow me. I think what happened was he liked how enthusiastic I was on Bitcoin and MicroStrategy and how I was always saying, you are not bullish enough. So I think he was monitoring it from afar and he just said, hey, this guy will probably be fun to meet. Let's invite him. So that's how I got invited. And then, yeah, the 100K party was super fun. I got to meet a lot of cool people, and obviously I got to meet Michael Saylor for a couple minutes. So that was really epic. It was really cool to be at the 100K party, especially with the context of I think Bitcoin's going to be the future, because that party was done at a time when I'd say 99% of people didn't believe in Bitcoin. So I post that to my friends, right? They don't really even see the value of meeting Michael Saylor or being at a 100K party. They think I'm closer to following a Ponzi scheme or scam than I am to being on to anything. So it's kind of weird because I feel like that was really cool, but then to the general public, they don't really see the value of it. So that's interesting to me. I feel like we're at an interesting point in history where to some people, Bitcoin is obviously going to be the future and take over the world. And we kind of see it clearly, but then 99% of people still are so against it and think it's going to crash. So I think that's kind of the interesting thing is the perception of it. Because when you're in the party or you're in the Bitcoin community, it's easy to fall into, oh, this is clear, this is obvious, everyone has to think this. But then you enter the real world or you post it to your friends and they're kind of just questioning you and thinking you're crazy. So that was also kind of funny to see. But yeah.
Yeah, man, it was awesome to see you there. I love that you were wearing your MicroStrategy shirt and took your
Yeah, it was nice to meet you too.
respect. Yeah, it was great to meet you. Have fun playing with your MicroStrategy.
So you've heard Bitcoin is the new gold rush by now. As world leaders on all sides have endorsed it as the future of money and now you're looking to get started, we'll show you how. It's actually easier than you think. First, go to your nearest Byte Federal ATM and turn your cash to coin. Byte Federal has over 1,200 locations around the country with the highest daily limits. Go to our website, bytefederal.com, to find the nearest ATM to you. Log in to any wallet, then create an account, deposit your US cash, and instantly convert it to Bitcoin. That's it. We are the only US manufacturer and operator in the Bitcoin ATM industry, and our US-based live customer service is second to none. Go on, give it a whirl, and don't get left behind. Click the link below.